We are continuing in our Christian apologetics. This section is the Bible is the Word of God, and we are defending that. This morning, we spoke concerning the flood. The flood was massive. It was a catastrophic event that was worldwide. Surely there must be evidence of that somewhere. And here is the thing. From all the evidence from different directions, you still have naysayers. You still have those that will say it couldn't happen. Show them that they're looking for evidence. You show them evidence. They explain away that evidence, regardless of what it is. They explain it away. I was just reading somebody today talking about there's not enough water on this earth to flood the earth. And we spoke this morning that indeed there is. We just don't see it. It is deep inside the core of the earth. It is some 400 miles below our feet where it is stored away. There are oceans under the oceans. And as we were reading to a particular writer this morning, said that if it concerned a mineral that could hold the water, that what's underneath us may be 3 times more ocean than what we see on the surface. And that means 3 times more than all the oceans put together, and all the seas and all the lakes put together. But the Bible describes these cataclysmic events on the earth as history. If the Bible is true, we would expect to find evidence of those events, and we are talking about the worldwide flood. And we're in this section of where did the water come from? I want us to look at this very quickly. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Now, just briefly, concerning, we discussed the fountains of the great deep. Here are 2 sources that are coming from underneath the oceans and above everything, above all the earth from the sky. But the fountains of the great deep, here's one example that is under the ocean. And here is basically just kind of an idea of the depth that this water came from. That we are talking about aquifers that are extremely deep, but even further than that, going from like 250 to 400 miles under the earth, there is water that is stored in a mineral called ringwoodite. And there's a tremendous amount of water underneath us. And it would take pressure, yes, massive pressure, to push that up to where you'd have the water levels rising just from these fountains of the great deep. And here's an idea, I hope you can make it out. The red dots on this are places of known, they're hydrothermal vents, and this is where they're mostly located, I suppose. Just to give you an idea, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them that are out there. Now, we talk about the windows of heaven were open, and this is more than a rainstorm. Far more, because something is crashing down that was put up there on day 2. Genesis chapter 1, beginning in verse 6, then God said, this is the 2nd day, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Well, that sounds very strange. And let it divide the waters from the waters. A firmament is heaven. All right, that sounds very strange. Thus God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, so the evening and the morning were the 2nd day. On day 2, he had prepped everything for the flood, but also He is creating a world that's very different from what we have today in one big aspect. One, we call this the water canopy. And I've just done a little quick illustration here. I hope you can make out the different colors. You have the water above the firmament, that's a water canopy, or we call it that. You have the water below the firmament, that's called the ocean. In between, that's the sky, that's the firmament. And the fact of the matter is, to have a firmament above the sky, you just place it there, and it will stay. You just place it there. You place the water there high over the firmament, way in the upper atmosphere, and it will stay. And there is one thing really that will bring it down. And one could say, well, that's going to be God. Well, yeah, it is. He will be doing it. But to bring it all crashing down, all it takes is dust. And it will all come crashing down. Dust, what could put that much dust into the upper atmosphere? A volcano. Volcano could do it. We have super volcanoes on the earth. I don't know exactly when they have erupted, but it wouldn't take a super volcano to do it anyway. But you have a volcano that puts out just tons and tons of dust, and all of this will come crashing down back on the earth. It's like the roof just caved in. But with that firmament there prior to the flood, here is a very, very good reason why they lived so much longer than us. There's probably more than just this reason. But they got less UV light. There's a lot of things they got less of because they were shielded by water far up in the sky. And the sky, or at least as far as the sun and the moon and stars, they probably looked different back then. Some have suggested that things would have been kind of magnified, that the moon would have looked larger because of it. But here we have in 2 Peter chapter 3, beginning in verse 5. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of His coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, as they died, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. So, where is judgment? These are scoffers. This isn't honest questioning. This are honest inquiry. It's none of that. This is just a scoffers saying this. For they willfully forget, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water and in the water. So we know what that means from Genesis chapter 1, beginning in verse 6, that you have a world that's out of water, yes, that you have dry continents, but also in the water, that is, the earth was surrounded in the upper atmosphere by a lot of water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. I was telling you, it came down. Now, we already knew that from Genesis chapter 6, but it came down. The windows of heaven were open, and this wasn't just a rainstorm. It wasn't. You couldn't really call it necessarily a meteorologic event that you could predict, because this was prior to that there had been no rain. Everything was watered by a mist from the ground. It had everything had been more of a warmer climate. We did have more of a greenhouse on this earth, and we do know that there were animals and plants in what we call the tundra today, up in northern Alaska, northern Canada, Siberia, northern Russia. There were animals that lived up there and plants that grew up there that can't grow there today and can't live there today. whatsoever. And so here it all perished. And now verse 7, but the heavens and the earth which are now preserved by the same word are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Just as there was a warning of a flood coming and destroying the entire population of the world except for 8, and there was plenty of time, plenty of warning. So too, we have been given a lot of warning. Now, we just ask the question, where did the water go? That's what the skeptics are asking. Where did the water go? And they'll accept no explanation. They won't accept it because they willfully don't accept it. But in essence, what happens is the great fountains of the deep, well, they take the water back in. That pressure then it ends, and you have the water returning back where it came from. But there's also something else, and this too is proof of a worldwide flood. Proof of it. Proof that water was extraordinarily high on the earth. And there it is. You have the Antarctic ice plain, you could call it that is in the middle of the continent. And there are places where it is well known that the ice is between 2 miles and 3 miles thick. All right, where did that come from? All right, it's got to come from somewhere. If somehow I get my dream and I go and melt all of Antarctica. No, that was a childhood dream anyway. But it would definitely cause some problems around the world if that were to happen, because there's an awful lot of water here that's going to start beginning to raise sea levels a bit. But we still, it's not going to do as much as had been done from the flood, because quite a bit of it went back underground. Now, there must be physical evidence of a worldwide flood. There has to be. It's enough to talk about the feasibility of it, like we did this morning, of everything from the ark and the animals and all of that. And it's also of the, is there an available water on the earth for this to happen? Okay, all of that looks good, but there's got to be evidence that it actually took place. Here is the usual argument number 4. It was a local flood. The world was not covered in water. All right, well, the text gives a different idea in this. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. All right, if it's a local flood, there's no need to destroy, or if the population is only in one spot, I suppose there'd be no need to flood the entire earth. But the population of the earth has spread out considerably. There's no doubt about that. And that he would have to flood the entire earth to kill everybody, which is the goal. But here we go to verse 19. And the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. If all the high points of the earth are covered, everything's covered. There's no place to escape. You're going to have to tread water for a long time. And the fact is, this was not gentle, as we're about to see. This came with a fury behind it. It came with it's very, very fast. And there are things that just could not escape. Okay, so let's look first for evidence of a worldwide flood. We begin in the most obvious place, the desert. We go there. This is Wadi al-Hitan. It is in Egypt. It is 140 miles from an ocean. That's the Mediterranean. 140 miles. It is 350 feet above sea level. And the highest point, I just want to put this in here, the highest point in Florida is lower than that. Okay. Just that if water made it to Wadi al-Hitan, if the sea levels got up to there, yeah, Florida's gone. Florida's already left. But this 350 feet above sea level, and here it is. Maybe you can see the blue. There it is. This is Egypt. That's the Mediterranean, and it's over 100 miles to the coast. And there it is. And this has another name other than Wadi al-Hitan. It is also known as the Valley of the Whales. All right, everybody knows. There's no denying there are whale bones there. All right, how did they get there? And it's more than just whales, actually. There's all kinds of evidence of shells and various other marine animals that happen to have lived in there. And this is an extraordinary thing. And what would have happened is, of course, with the worldwide flood, that's like the fish's golden age right there, and the whale's golden age. You can swim anywhere you want to. You don't have to go around inconvenient land masses. Islands are bad enough, but continents are the worst. Now you can just go right over the continents, just glide right over where civilizations used to be, where cities used to be. But here, coming into this valley, as the water is running off of land, unless you get out of this valley, as a whale, unless you get out of this valley, soon you're going to be in a lake. And soon that lake's going to dry up and there's just death. And that's exactly what happened. It all dried up there. Now, we come from there, the desert, now to mountains. And with this is the Dinosaur National Monument. It is both in Colorado and in Utah. This is 790 miles from an ocean, that would be the Pacific. It's 1.1 miles above sea level. And in this are rocks that are sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are laid down by water. It's very much like concrete. To have concrete, you have to have water in the mix. And once that water dries, it hardens up. And that is what we have here. Oh, yeah, here's where okay, so you have the Pacific over here. Way over here is the National Monument there. And these dinosaur fossils are locked in sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock doesn't just fall from the sky. Sedimentary rock has to be, it is in a mud form first, and as a silt, the silt is laid down by the water, and of course it remains mud until it dries. When it dries, it becomes rock. And so here is, in this particular national park, you see the bones that happen to be in the quarry. And these are some very, very massive bones. But here's another thing about it. These animals did not die individually. These animals died and were buried. Well, actually, they were buried alive simultaneously because their bones are intertangled, which means their bodies were intertangled. They were a jumble of dinosaurs and whatever other animals that happen to be there. But here is, under usual conditions, when an animal dies, its body falls to the ground and is eaten by scavengers and slowly decays away. And usually it happens one by one, unless there's a disease or something like that. Usually this happens one by one. If the animal isn't attacked first by some predator, but just dies on its own, which is more likely what happened there on the other side of the flood, just died on its own. What I'm getting at is that it is a rare thing that any animal is fossilized. It's rare because certain circumstances have to take place. One is that their body has to be buried. It's got to be. And it has to be buried in water that would hold minerals in it, and those minerals penetrate into the bone, and the bone does become rock eventually. It's just penetrated in there. All right, and so we have this conglomeration of all these bones, of all these animals that were there. They were all buried together in a quick event. Over 1 mile above sea level, they were covered in sediment that eventually hardened into sedimentary rock. That only happens in a catastrophic flood. There's no other way to put it. There's no tsunami can do this. There's no evidence a tsunami ever does this. And that's quite a tsunami getting up there. That we could call that monstrous, and it was monstrous. There would have been enormous tidal waves, no doubt about that. But these things are going over continents now, and as the water is being increased across the world, and so here we have all this is just bones through all this, and it's not. Once again, it's not that this one died and then another one died and a few years later another one died. They're all dying together. And they're all caught in that rock. All right, they are buried in one event. All right, that this came with power and with fury. To be able to do that to these massive animals, what was it doing to smaller things? So we go underwater just to show how quick it was. If you see that, what do you know? No, you know this happened quick. This happened quick. It's in the middle of eating this other fish, and they both die. All right, well, there's justice for you. But they both die in that you know this happened fast, that both these fish were buried in silt very quickly. Now, here is the thing. This isn't the only one. There are more. I didn't put them all down here. But this is not the same. These are not the same fish. Fish eat fish. That's a common thing. That's that happens a lot. But this is another one. But I could have put more in here. That this was a common thing, or is found as common. That you have these fish that are in the process of eating another fish, and both of them are immediately buried. All right, that's a lot of power in there. And once again, actually, it's more so. A fish being fossilized is far more rare than an animal that's on land. Far more rare. Because, let me just ask you this. When they went and finally made it down to the Titanic, whoever it was, I forgot who it was that went down there. How many bodies did they find? They found none. You might find boots, belt buckles, things like that, but you will find no body. Why is that? There'd be no bones. No bones would be there. Why would that be? Because the ocean has all kinds of things that consumes everything, whether it happens to be a fish or whether it happens to be a human that died in a shipwreck, that even the bones will be consumed. They will be consumed, from microscopic organisms to other creatures that dwell at the bottom of the ocean. This is what they live on. They live on the things that die and fall to the bottom. That's what they live on. And for us to have any kind of remnant of these fish means that nothing was able to eat them at all, because they're buried. Now, we see, just like with the dinosaurs, but I think we can see it better, that all these were done, these all died at the same time. With whatever they were doing. This looks like there seems to be a pushing going on. Not that the fish were pushing each other, but that there was of currents of silt or whatnot. And here's an entire school, some sort of minnow, some sort of smaller fish, and they've all been buried together. And you can see that everything is intertwined in there. And we see the same thing here with these larger fish. Something did that, and whatever it was sizable. It's very sizable. Now we head off to the tundra, and here we get into some amazing things. In the tundra, when the flood occurred, there were animals and people living all over the place. And what is now tundra, what is now has permafrost, and prior to the flood didn't have permafrost or any frost. There were plants and animals living there that cannot possibly live there today. There were rhinos that lived, rhinoceros that lived up in the Arctic regions. No, they can't do that today. It's way too cold. And there were other things such as sloths and various animals that cannot live that far north. And really, when you get that far north, the amount of animals that can actually survive up there becomes narrower and narrower. But what occurred during the flood is where you have silt and other things burying stuff, but unlike these other places where, such as in the Rockies where it becomes rock, this was just dirt and mud, and it didn't take long before it froze. Evidently, things changed very quickly. And of course, at the end of chapter 8, Genesis chapter 8, we have these words, verse 22, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. So here is this word of winter and summer. Now, no doubt they understood things as having a cooler time of the year and a warmer time of the year, or whatever. But here, I think it truly means winter that they hadn't seen before. Now, with things that are buried, and they would be buried alive in the tundra and frozen, that means they would be preserved in remarkable shape. Here is a baby mammoth. This is from the Yukon, which is in Canada. That is a pre-diluvian animal that lived prior to the flood, and the flood killed it. These guys do not live up there anymore. They don't live. Here is another one. This is one that was found in Siberia. This one has the fur still on it. And this one also was in Siberia. And all of these were covered in dirt and, of course, water. And buried, and that's where they have been found. And they are kept in an enormous deep freeze. And I have read where places like Siberia, way up in the north, should they have warm days during the summer, exceptionally warm days during the summer, it gets rough, actually. Everything gets very, very muddy, but also things underneath the surface, and perhaps not very far underneath the surface, begin to stink. And it doesn't smell very good. And it would be dead things that were left by the flood. And here's some examples. Here is also, this is, you wonder what is that? That's actually a frozen foal, also from Siberia. It was under a lot of dirt is where they found it and preserved. Once again, these animals are pre-diluvian. If this had been able to survive, or I should say, two of its relatives were on the ark, and we have a horse population continue on. But now let's talk about geological results. We've seen fossils, preserved animals, but now we go to a place like this. This is the Grand Canyon. Never mind, that's man-made up there, obviously. Here is the Grand Canyon, and I want you to notice that they want to say that it took millions of years for the Colorado River to do this. But no river does that. This doesn't even behave like a river. To see this, what a river does is a river begins to cut out places, and it continues to cut out that place. Once it's found a place, it continues to cut it out. Now, granted, things can make that shift. It can. Weather can make that shift. Storms and whatnot can make that shift. But this is too big. This is too grand. It's the Grand Canyon. This is a single river can't do it. And I'm going to show you why also it can't do it. It can't do it for a very simple reason. All right, we just look at Genesis 8 and verse 3. And the waters receded continually from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the waters decreased. The water has to go somewhere. All right, we talked about the fountains of the deep now taking in water. There would also be evaporation going on, but you would have a tremendous amount of water going off the land where it had been and heading back off the continents and back into the oceans where you'd say it belongs. And that is the explanation for this, that took a lot of water, and they want to say that no, something like this takes millions of years. But if you do this by an ocean that happened to be resting on top of the Grand Canyon, when it's draining away, cutting into the earth, that's what it's going to leave behind. That's what it's going to do. Then the ark rested in the 7th month, the 7th day of the month, in the mountains of Ararat, and the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So it's continuing to spill off of the land. Now, as it's spilling off, it is taking silt with it. It's taking topsoil with it. It's taking all kinds of things with it. It could be taking trees with it, trees that it had already uprooted. But you have all these things spilling off, and this is the point at which, really, I think, you have fish being buried because the silt coming off of there. But let's look at just some facts. The top of the Grand Canyon You have the northern ridge, the southern ridge. You have 7,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level. Okay, that's pretty good. The Colorado River is what they claim cut away the Grand Canyon. The Colorado River begins up in the Rocky Mountains. It's at around 10,000 feet above sea level. So yeah, going 10,000 to 8,000, not a big deal. That's all right. But it does pass through Moab, Utah, the Colorado River. And that's at 4,000 feet above sea level. And so the floor of the Grand Canyon is about 2,600 feet above sea level. So we see this, starting from the Rocky Mountains at 10,000 to Moab, Utah at 4,000 to the Grand Canyon floor at 2,600 feet. All right, that works. That works quite well. But the problem is, if the Grand Canyon is not already carved out, it can't do that. It can't do it at all. The Grand Canyon had to have already been carved out by a massive amount of water heading off to the Pacific for the Colorado River to make it into the Grand Canyon floor. Otherwise, it would have to do this. If it is the thing that created the Grand Canyon, it goes from 10,000 feet to 4,000 feet back up to 8,000 feet to start away at the Grand Canyon. It's got to hike 3/4 of a mile going from Moab, Utah up 8,000 feet. All right, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's got to cut away at the top. It can't just cut away at the bottom. It cuts away at the top. And so the Rocky Mountains, or I should say Moab, Utah, is not in ancient times higher than the Grand Canyon rim. It's pretty much set. And so it can't do that. The Colorado River cannot make such cannot make that. It can't do it. And like I said, no river is going to do that. None. Mississippi can't do that. Nile, the Amazon, none of them can do this. Rivers behave like rivers. This looks like spill-off. This looks like a tremendous amount of water leaving at one time. Now here's another thing. This is the Tapeats sandstone. This too is part of the Grand Canyon, or one of the canyons, separate, but in the same thing. And I want you to notice this bending here. This is sandstone. The only way this can happen is if it's wet. That is, it's mud. That's the only way it can happen. It can't bend like this at all. If you were to take this sandstone, and this was supposedly formed, like 50 million years ago, something like that. Well, for that to happen, if this sandstone was being bent, it would break. It would shatter. It couldn't do that. It couldn't do it at all. And they want to say that it was pressure and heat, but if there was pressure and heat, it would change it structurally. It would change it geologically. It'd be very different than this. This folded up because it could be. Now, a lot of pressure, yeah, a lot of force on it, but this was wet and put down wet, and then pressure's now able to fold it like this. Now, tell you what, we're going to be opening up a very large section now, so we're going to call it a class for today, and I appreciate everybody being here, and hopefully we can continue next week. Thank you.